Sweet.
All right. Hey guys, my name is hi. My name is Kyle Moeller,
I'm Gabby Skilling.
and we're here to talk to all of you about some of the basics behind website design and maintenance. So a quick overview of how this presentation is going to play out. First, we're going to talk a little bit about the basics of design, the purpose of your website, the importance of clarity and simplicity, your viewer experience, the image choice, and then also the various software options for your website. And then the second part of that presentation is going to be about maintenance. We'll talk a little bit about the responsibility of maintaining a website, the constant updating required, user interaction, and then also a schedule to help you perfectly maintain your website. And then an overview of this presentation. The purpose is to give all of you a general idea and some specific concepts about how to either start a new website or improve upon the one that you already have.
So part one, the basics of website design. So a really good question to ask yourself is that if people have one click on your website, what do you want that one click to be? So this will determine the purpose of your website and thus what should go on your homepage. So your homepage is also really crucial because that's going to be the first thing that any user or viewer is going to see on your website. And that's going to determine whether they're going to stay longer or if they're going to try to find the information through some other way.
So now you ask the question, how do you achieve that goal of being as informative and of being as impactful as possible? So how do you make your website, which is the window from the inner workings of your team to the outside world, as informative as possible and as clear as possible? So we're going to talk about clarity. The first idea is just as you would with an English essay, you want to rewrite 2, 3, 4 times each of your paragraphs to make sure that it's not wordy and as concise as possible so that a viewer can get from point A to point B with minimal effort, so minimizing the wording. Additionally, the quick scan is really important. That's the idea that especially on your homepage, which is the viewer's first experience of your team, that they can quickly scan in 2 or 3 seconds your page and know from the headings and font styles and photos what the page is about and what the purpose is. This is even true on the sub pages. And then minimizing paragraphs and options. So if you're confronted with a large amount of information, especially if it's pretty coherent, but just remember to always break it up into paragraphs. And if you can, reorganize that information so that you can use subheadings. And then viewer experience and aesthetic. I'm going to talk about that in a few slides, so I'm not going to cover it too much now, but it connects directly to staying concise, the quick scan, and then minimizing paragraphs and options. So up here we have 2 examples, sort of a before and after kind of thing. We have our team's first page, and this is an example of not a very clear or concise website subpage. It has 1 heading, several blocks of text that are fairly confrontational to the eye, and additionally 1 photo. On the left, on the other hand, we have our general Davis Youth Robotics page, where it's split vertically. Additionally, there are photos associated with each block of text. Those blocks of text are fairly short with subheadings, and additionally, there are outlet links to Sign Up Geniuses to get more information. Also, you can notice the page is split vertically, which decreases the distance the eye has to read from left to right and makes the viewer experience overall improved.
Okay, so there are some laws of simplicity that are generally very helpful to follow when you're designing your website. So the first one is reduction. So this doesn't just mean reducing large blocks of text. This could mean getting rid of double pages or maybe combining 2 pages that serve a similar purpose into 1 page. It could also mean getting rid of dead links or unnecessary steps that a user may have to undergo to get to their end goal. Second is organize. So you're going to have a lot of information on your website naturally, but if you keep your website organized and consistent, all of that information won't appear so overwhelming to the viewer. Instead, it'll be very easy for them to find what they're looking for. Next is time. You want to save the amount of time it takes for your viewer to get from one point to another. We've all been on websites before where they're really slow to load, or it's really difficult for you to figure out what you're looking for. And it's a lot more efficient and it leaves the viewer a lot happier if it's very simple for them to figure out what they need. So you can do this just the same as reduction. It's really getting rid of unnecessary steps and making it simple. Next is context. So we all have a very similar audience. Most of our websites are going to be targeted towards other teams, parents, or sponsors that are going to come looking for information. So your website's going to be informative, and you need to know what they're already going to know versus what they may need more explaining on. Like technical information and a lot of mechanical words are typically going to need more explaining to sponsors or parents versus just general information. If you try to tell your audience everything, you're going to end up telling them nothing. And lastly is failure. So some things can't be made simple. They're naturally complex. You have to have a lot of steps to go through. You just have to let that be. And then other times, maybe in the past, you've seen really complex things and you've boiled it down. It's important to look at that so you can go back at failures and see if you can take it from another angle.
So now you want to ask, how do you optimize that viewer experience and that purpose of the website of being as informative as possible? And we have a few suggestions up here about how to overall improve that viewer experience. First, always keep in mind that the photo should tell the story and that the text should elaborate. One photo can use logos, ethos, and pathos to convince the audience of literally almost anything. So be decisive in your choice of photos. And then use the text to maybe say something that the photo can't, or just simply elaborate. That's much easier on the eye and much more aesthetic, improving the overall viewer experience. Also, keep in mind the eye draw and placement. Your eye is naturally drawn to the top left corner of every web page, which is why you oftentimes see in large corporations the logo or team name or team number, which I totally recommend for all of us, at the top left of your general page, of your home page. And then on subpages, consider putting a photo of importance up there. And then click and scroll fatigue. This is also important to keep in mind. A shallower website opposed to a deeper website with more links and outlets is much easier, not only for the viewer, but also for the person maintaining it. We recommend only about 3 sublinks inside your website. And then scroll fatigue. So this is the idea that you could be scrolling for way too long down a web page and it gets muddled and confusing. Actually, an example of that on our team, we have a past robots page that dates back to our 2011 robot. And what it used to be is that each section was given the same amount of information, a slideshow and several paragraphs about the technical information on that robot. An update that we recently did is made the most recent robot given its slideshow and all of the technical information, and then below that reformatted the page so that each robot has only a small block of text with a photo with a general description, and then an outlet link where you can learn all the more specific information on that robot. So that just shows how you can improve viewer experience using that knowledge about click and scroll fatigue. Then confronting information blocks. Sometimes you have lots of coherent information and it seems difficult or confrontational to try to split that up. Just do your best in reorganizing that information, put subheaders, change that font, styling, that ties directly into style diversity, maybe utilizing that color palette of yours, and then also just splitting it up as best you can. And yeah, that's the general idea behind viewer experience.
So image choice. It's really good to use a lot of images on your website. As Kyle said earlier, text should elaborate and images should be telling the story. This helps because it makes your website appear a lot simpler and it just is easier on the eye. So this checklist is very helpful when you're thinking about publishing an image on your website. The first one is enforce. Is this image enforcing some theme or idea like a team logo, your team number, or maybe something that could be generally associated with an organization? Secondly would be to inform. Does the photo tell a story? What is it telling? And lastly, it would be to connect. So you want to connect with your viewer on an emotional level because this leaves a lasting impact and one that they will typically remember. So the photo at the right, it checks off all 3 criteria. First is enforce. You can see that the shirts in the background, they're from our Davis Youth Robotics program, and they have the logo on there that is associated with that brand. Secondly is to inform. So it's on our actual Davis Youth Robotics page, and it's informing mostly parents about what happens at these camps. So it's telling the story. And then lastly, it connects. You can see that all the children are focusing, they're working hard, and they're smiling. This connects with the viewers on an emotional level, and it leaves them feeling happy, which is what they'll remember.
All right, so now software options. These are important to keep in mind because it can be overwhelming because there are so many software options out there for website design. These are some things to keep in mind, like price. We are a high school robotics team, and everyone has a very limited budget. So if it's an outrageous price, probably consider not getting it. Additionally, there are tons of free options out there. Our team currently uses Weebly, and we use the free version. If there are ever any abilities that the free version of Weebly doesn't offer, we purchase them for a few dollars, and then we have it forever. So that works totally fine for us. If your team, however, has other there are other abilities that your team requires your website software to have, then consider spending a little bit more and taking out monthly a little bit of the team budget to pay for a nicer website software. And then lastly, reliability. A lot of the software is fairly new and can be kind of sketchy, meaning that sometimes it's not updating consistently, or it's crashing, or the formatting, it's not user-friendly, the website software itself. So consider maybe spending more, or reconsider the abilities that you require and find a different website. During some searching and research, we found that Wix.com is pretty highly recommended. So we would definitely recommend looking further into that.
Okay, so now we've reached part 2 of our presentation, and that's going to be the basics of website maintenance. A good rule to go by on website maintenance is that your website is never finished. There are always going to be more updates to complete, whether that is replacing links, reformatting a page, or adding a completely new page.
All right, so responsibility. When you're the person maintaining your website, you not only have a responsibility to the viewer base, but also to your team, to keeping that information current and updated and always accurate. So up here, we outlined a few things to keep in mind, or ideas to keep in mind when worrying about your responsibility on the team. We highly recommend creating a changing list. So this is the idea that there's information on your website that needs to constantly update, maybe your sponsor info, or your match information, or your social media posts weekly, or newsletters. So make a list as specific as possible of those things on your website that are going to update, and then even put dates in so that you can know exactly when that needs to be updated, and that you're as organized as possible with that. And then perspective. Keep in mind team image and your viewer base. Their opinions matter just as much as yours. So make it as easy as possible for them to express their opinions and give you those opinions on your website. And then team image, of course, because you are reflecting your team. Just as students have to act professional at competition, you want your website to be well-written, professional, organized, and always aesthetic.
Okay, so the constant updating of website maintenance. So your website should be geared to make visitor experience more enjoyable, which means that most of your updates should also be focused to improve their experience. So this can be done through multiple ways. This means simply elaborating on vague pieces of information, or if you have too much about a thing that the reader would already know, cutting down on that. Just simple things like that. Accuracy and attention on your website. Most people on your website are going to look for information, just like we covered earlier. So if your information on there is outdated or inaccurate, you're going to earn the reputation of an unreliable website, and that means there are going to be less viewers visiting. They're going to try to find that information through another source. Boosting site traffic. So Google and other search engines rank your website based off of certain criteria, and one of those criteria is going to be how often that website is updated. So if you have one website from 2010 that was updated 2 days ago versus a website from 2015 that has not been updated since, the 2010 website is going to have a higher ranking. This doesn't seem like it would be very important if someone were to remember your team name, your team number, things like that exactly. But if they can't quite remember what your team name is, or they can only remember keywords or things associated with your team, when they type those words in, your website's more likely to pop up the more constantly you update it. And then always improving. If you look at websites from the late 90s, early 2000s versus today's websites in 2018, you're going to see a large difference in formatting, design, what was considered aesthetically pleasing then versus what is visually pleasing now. So when you're constantly updating your website, that means that all of those changes are being made, and they're being made on a smaller scale. So when you go through and try to make updates, it's not as overwhelming to go through and format 15 different pages to make it seem more modern versus maybe only one.
Yeah, the more often that you update, the smaller the updates have to be, and then the overall maintenance is much easier. So user interactions, a little bit like I mentioned earlier, you kind of want to center your website around viewer experience and user interactions. You want to make it absolutely as easy as possible for the viewer to be able to give you opinions and questions and feedback and statistics, because their opinions matter just as much, if not more, as yours. Just like if you're writing an English essay, after you've read it tons and tons of times and it just kind of blurs in your mind and you can't think about how to improve it, it's the same thing with maintaining a website. other people looking at it and giving you feedback is really, really important. It also gives you direction in that website and teaches you how to improve it. If there's something that you need to stress more or stress less or elaborate on further for explanation's sake, then make sure to take that into account. I think that the bottom of our webpage is a fairly good example of this. We have a search bar, obvious email us, home, about, support us, contact us. And then additionally, we have a Facebook connection, Twitter, and email, just that we can get opinions and ideas as easily as possible so that Gabby and I have a focus and have an idea about how to improve our website beyond what we already think.
Okay, so schedule. So if you have a list of all these updates that need to get done, it can be kind of overwhelming, and it gets difficult to know what you should be prioritizing versus what you shouldn't prioritize. So one thing to put on your schedule for website updates is going to be routine checkups. There are going to be certain pages that you know are going to need to be updated annually, like course descriptions or your sponsor page. And there are others that need to be updated a lot more frequently. Like if you have a page devoted to your newsletters, that may need to be updated month by month versus a social media page that could be updated irregularly or it could be updated weekly. So having those down on your schedule will help you to prioritize which website pages you should be updating and you know which are coming up. A list of updates. So also when you're scrolling through your website, if you notice something like a small misspelled word, or maybe there's a border around a photo that shouldn't be there, put that on the list too, because you're going to have a small amount of time, maybe 5 minutes, when that could be very useful and you could go through and try and fix those versus really big updates like when we redesigned our past robots page. That's definitely going to take a lot longer than changing a border on a photo. So having all those on a list will definitely help keep you organized. And then setting deadlines. If you set deadlines for all of these different updates, it's going to help you stick to them, and it's going to help these updates become more efficient and more effective because they're going to get done sooner. And then a style guide. So a style guide for your website is a small graphic that typically has all the information you need to know to keep branding on your website consistent. So that's going to be the colors that you should be using on your website. For example, on our website, we use this color green, we use the gray, white, and black. So those are the 4 colors we use on our website. If we find any other color, we need to change the color to keep it consistent, and we can find the exact shade that we want on the style guide. Also, you have fonts, font sizes available on there too.
Besides that, our presentation has concluded. If you have any questions, totally feel free to ask. And we have a QR code. It would be great if you guys could scan that. It's a quick survey where you can give some more feedback on this fall workshop presentation, or feel free to email us at business@citruscircuits.org. But thank you. Okay, any questions? Okay. Thank you. And it is only 7:26, so you guys should totally feel free to go check out other workshops. There are tons next door and in the ASC also.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Sweet.
Good job.